My mouth is on fire, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Live Your Mission show, brought to you by Mission Meets, where our guests share their most actionable advice so that you can live a more mission-centered life. I'm your host, Peter Alwood, and today we're joined by my friend Nate Spees from the company Grizzly. But before we get to that, here's what's going on over at Mission Meets headquarters. Hey, guys, real quick, I've mentioned this before. We have officially launched our Super Fans program, and that's to an exclusive group of people who have reached a certain order threshold, and they're going to start getting free stuff in the mail. We're going to be asking them for their advice on new flavors, new packaging, new different limited edition stuff. We're going to be asking for your feedback, and we're going to listen, right? A novel idea, we're going to listen to your ideas, and you might see your idea that you come up with for a product or the way that we package it or a service that we offer come to life because you provided feedback. And because of that, you'll be getting, like I said, free stuff in the mail, whether it's like sample product that we're working on in the Meat Lab or something different. We'll also be giving you guys early access to new stuff as it comes out. So you'll be able to get access to products that aren't even listed on the website anywhere. Even maybe at an extensive, is that the right word? No, deep discount, right? Because we want your feedback, because you have voted with your wallet that you are invested with Mission Meats, and we want to acknowledge you, and we also want to thank you for it in the ways that we can in our weird business of consumer packaged goods and meat snacks, right? So if you want to be in on that, be listening out for it. We'll be pinging you via email if you're on a certain order level with us to remind you that you are on track. And last I heard, you get to like the 5 order level or a little bit more than that, and you're going to be instantly opted in if that's something that's interesting to you. So listen out for that. All right, back to the show. All right, now on to our guest, Nate Spees. We talk about creativity. This guy is a creative master, runs a creative and branding agency called Grizzly, also runs Creative Mornings down in San Diego. And we talk about creativity, what that means, why it's important to inject creativity in the organization, why everybody can be creative and they're capable of being creative, and they are creative beings. And he also talks about how it needs to be infused in all aspects of the organization. So it's not just the marketing creative agency that's siloed and they're the ones that are supposed to be creative and then everybody else can just do their own thing. But instead, it needs to be one of these things where it's company-wide. And they all need to be looking at their part of the organization, their contribution in the organization through a creative lens. And he talks about ways to infuse that, ways to think outside of the box. I don't think he used that terminology, but thinking outside of the box, different tools he has there for, changing your environment or using different tools in order to kind of break up the monotony of the way that our meetings are held or the way that our ideas are sparked. And so we talk through all that. And then in the Reaper round, just see this guy. He kills the Reaper. He handles it really, really well. So check that out. We talk through his, favorite books and favorite book and some of the things he's changed his mind about. Really, really valuable conversation with my friend Nate Spees. And I think we all could really, really level up in our creative juices. And I don't care if you're already in a creative environment or not. There are definitely ways that we can then take that and level it up. Do a little bit better in injecting that and making it part of the fabric. And he talks through that. So without any further ado, I bring to you my conversation with Nate Spees. Nate, welcome to the show, bro.
Glad to be here. Excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you, man. And we'll try to keep this one shorter. You and I get together and we talk for hours and hours, right? And so maybe the listener doesn't want to hear us talk for 3 or 4 hours and a bunch of banter, but I know you're going to bring the noise, man. So I'm excited to just jump right in with our usual first question, which is, what's your mission? When somebody asks you what you're working on, what do you say?
Sure. I think my mission is to encourage and enable creativity in the communities that I'm involved in. And so for me, that looks like a lot of different things. My day job is the CEO of a creative agency here in San Diego called Grizzly. But I also host the largest breakfast lecture series in San Diego for the creative community called Creative Mornings. And I started a nonprofit called the San Diego Creative Foundation to also elevate the just creative expressions being established and communicated here in San Diego. So it's been a blast to really build all of what I'm participating in around this theme of creativity and this theme of really just driving our best work out of the creative expression.
Why is that important to you? I mean, creativity. To me, it seems very, very general, right? Like, why?
Yeah, sure.
What is creativity? Like, what does that mean to you? And then why is it so important to you?
Yeah, so great question. For me, creativity is simply using our imagination to bring something new into the world, right? Like there's so many broad definitions of what creativity can be. And I haven't spent a ton of time trying to say, this is how you need to define it. But for me, I think creativity is so powerful and so important because I think it provides us with a framing and a faculty to actually see transformation take place. And oftentimes, I love to say creativity is a great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your circumstances are. Creativity can empower you to think differently and to see transformation take place both in your own life and also in the community around you. And so for us, why I love talking about creativity is because I think a lot of our world and a lot of how we've developed commerce and capitalism, all these things have actually suppressed a lot of our creative talents and our creative ability. In the last decade, I would say it's become more of a priority for many, many people as design's gotten more of a seat at the table, so to say, in most organizations globally. But still, when we talk about creativity, there's still this tension between art and science and commerce and culture. And so I think creativity really is at the intersection of both of those things. And for me, I just love being in that messy middle and figuring out ways to create value right there, right in the middle of business and the communities we're involved in.
What are you seeing that's like a common thread, mistakes that companies or organizations are making where they're not injecting the creativity or they're not making it a priority? Like what are some of the common themes you're seeing?
That's a really good question. I would say, and maybe just to take a step back on that question, my business at Grizzly, we're a very, very brand-centric creative agency. And so for us, brand is really the relationship between an organization and the people that come in contact with it. And that's a dynamic, ever changing, very fluid relationship in this day and age where how we reach customers, how we interact with customers, all of those things are like in constant flux. The analogy I give is, marketing functions these days are building the wall on one side, adding levers to the wall, and on the other side, they're like tearing the wall down because it's not working anymore. And so there's a ton of transformation happening all the time as it relates to connecting with customers. And what I see is where organizations are missing right now is, one, in our fast-paced environment, it's much easier to follow the market leader than it is to be bold and creative in how you're telling your story. And what we see we work in business to business, we work in business to consumer, we work in direct to consumer. In all of those spaces, a lot of what happens when there isn't enough time or we haven't, prioritized it is people just start copying the best player in town and start trying to just model off of what they're doing. And the challenge with that is, if you go back to how I just defined branding, is how your consumer and your customer relates to your product has absolutely nothing to do with how your competitor relates to their customers are related to their product. And so oftentimes I think we kind of sacrifice creativity and we sacrifice the opportunity to really be bold and differentiated. And instead, we end up kind of doing, the blind kind of ends up leading the blind, and everyone just starts doing the same thing. And you've seen the resurgence, you've seen this start to change in some markets. I would say one market in particular is like the business enterprise space. In the last decade has gone from a bunch of engineers running marketing departments to like more human-centered, more people-to-people language, realizing that like even B2B brands sell to people. They don't sell to other organizations. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a person on the other side of every business that is making an emotional and cognitive decision to choose you over someone else. And so I think you're starting to see that transformation take place. But I think really deep, not having it prioritized high enough on the creativity, not being prioritized high enough on the scale of importance, can lead us to scenarios where entire marketing groups can go, well, we've always done it this way, so we're just going to keep doing it this way. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes that works very, very well. And at other times, I think that can be a huge detriment and a missed opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, why are companies not prioritizing it, though? Is it because it's hard work? Or is it because we've forgotten that, and you touched on this earlier, we've forgotten there's a human being on the other end, that we've become more disconnected from the consumer?
Sure.
Are those some of the things that I think about this all the time where, small companies, they want to look big.
Right.
And then now big companies are trying to look small. Right.
Right.
And it's just funny because, you can be a one-person show and you're sending very professional emails to your customers, and it's okay to be professional, but it's like, you've lost a human connection. And consumers in the last 10 years have absolutely gone the other direction, where they want to feel like they're buying from a small batch, provider or manufacturer. They want to feel like they've got a connection to who the person is behind the veil there. And so I think that there's definitely a missed opportunity if you're removing some of that creativity, like as you're calling it, or removing some of that personality. And so is it because we want to feel bigger than we are? Or is it because we don't want to put in the time because it is really hard?
I think
what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combo of things, because I think what you just tapped into is the reality of the landscape, which is if you already have economies of scale, it's easier to prioritize some of these things because you go, well, we have a large team and everyone needs something to work on. So let's just get those folks to like work on this. I think when you're a small team, it can be a lot harder because it takes real time to come up with the differentiated, opportunities and experiences that make you uniquely you, and kind of like showcase that creativity that exists. And so I think for me and for our company, what we've seen is it's brands that kind of take two steps forward. They're pausing for like a moment to just make sure that they have clarity around purpose, that they have clarity around people being at the core, like people first, right? Like people are at the core of why they do what they do. And then they really just check themselves. Are they actually doing it boldly? And so for us, those kind of like three things have been the foundation of what we call adventurous brands at Grizzly. And really, to be adventurous, you really have to be doing all of those things. Because if you aren't doing that, it doesn't mean you can't not be successful. There's plenty of brands out there that are, just challenger brands, and instead of being bold and differentiated, they're copycat brands. They're just copying what's working. You go on Amazon, you'll find 15 brands that do that. That's not a bad strategy, but what we like to say, and what I believe, is that there's just so much more opportunity than that. Because experience drives so much of why all of us make purchase decisions, ranging from zero, from 50 cents, right, all the way through to hundreds of dollars. It's still about experience. And as we have more access and more choice than we've ever had before, we have an opportunity to create experiences that are memorable and meaningful and drive people to go, man, I really love that. I want to do that again. Mm-hmm. Plenty to, again, economics is at play in all this. There's plenty of different other realities that play into this. But for us, the creativity element is like it has to be the foundation, and it has to be part of the discussion. I think the other thing that makes us a little unique in how we think about this is, like, I'm a nerdy, MBA guy trapped in a creative guy's body. So like there's this part of me that also says, well, the creativity piece is really important. But the other side of it is, everyone in an organization, whether they're in the design group or the marketing group or any group, has to be thinking like a business strategist, which means you have to be outcomes oriented. You have to understand the economics of how your business works and how you make money. Because if you don't understand those pieces, every big idea in the world is only worth its weight in its ability to actually create the impact necessary to further propel growth and further propel brand building. And so if those two things aren't happening, you're kind of starting, you're back at the bottom of the hill going, well, this isn't really working.
Yeah. I love the idea of everybody being a strategist, because we had a conversation recently here at Mission Meets about you can't make decisions. So at one side, like to your point, all the sales and marketing ideas that you can have are great, but if they're not going to help the business make money, not help the business succeed, then they're just a waste of time, right?
Totally.
And I've had plenty of those ideas where I want to chase them. They're shiny, but they don't work out, right? Some of them very obvious in hindsight, some of them not, and we needed to try them. But on the other side of the coin is like, when you've got supply chain, or you've got procurement and stuff like that trying to drive decisions, they need to know, like, hey, no, just because this idea is efficient doesn't mean that it's the right thing for the customer. Totally. It's not on brand. It's not going to give them the right customer experience. So just because it makes sense on paper doesn't mean we're going to follow it, because we've got a brand to uphold, and that brand is not aligned with your idea, right? And so I like that, that you said that, because I think everybody needs to be on board. And so that brings me to another point, which is like, before all of this creativity conversation is being solid in your place as a company and what company you want to build, right?
Right.
If you want to be a copycat company and you're just going to put out another Me Too product and there is not going to be any brand, that's fine. Just know that that's what you're doing, and then move forward with that. But if it's not, then we need to be having this creativity conversation, right?
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, I think that's the piece of, like, you have to know who you are as an organization. And I think I've seen it time and time again. I mean, for context, like, we've worked with Fortune 100 organizations. We've done work with these, 150,000 employees, talking with, general managers of groups that have tens of thousands of people working for them. But we've also worked with startups where it's like 2 people and they have a dream. Regardless, both of those organizations actually have to know what they stand for. They have to know what their purpose is. And we call that the flag at Grizzly. But like, if they don't know what their flag is, it doesn't really matter, because you will not be able to work back from anything with kind of a concrete assurance and understanding of what's going on, if you're constantly in this merry-go-round of confusion about who you are. And oftentimes that's what happens. And I think that we've seen that especially through growth. I think in growth phases, what happens with organizations is they know who they are when they start, but then they start to experience different levels of either friction or just actually positive things, like, oh my gosh, we're making so much revenue, we never thought this was possible, and fail to go, well, wait, who are we? What do we stand for? And so there's kind of this cyclical cycle, which is why we talk about brand being the core of how you can really express creativity in the day-to-day, because if you're constantly looking at the relationship, if you're constantly looking at what people say about you, understanding what that relationship is built off of, what trust is established there, all these different pieces. When you get to that point, you can be a lot more cyclical. Because I think the big change that's taking place in organizations across the board is to succeed in this day and age, you have to be nimble enough to be constantly iterative in your approach. So regardless of if you're marketing a $1 billion company or you're marketing a company that hasn't made $1, you still have to be learning constantly, and you still have to be reflecting that learning into your next cycle of behavior. So whatever you're going to do next needs to be very connected to what just happened.
Yeah. So what's your advice for someone who they want to be nimble, and they want to inject some creativity in their business, and they want to be learning and iterating? What are a couple of tips and ways to kick that off?
Sure. I think a couple of things it's quite simple, actually, if you start thinking about how you can practically apply some of these things. One is create a rhythm of your business when it comes to marketing, where you're able to constantly check in on the progress and progression that's taking place on a few different levels. One is on a brand level. So on a brand awareness level, what we like to say is with our clients, we go, hey, quarterly, like no more of this 12-month marketing plan where we define it 6 months early and then we start running a playbook and we're like, well, we're not really going to check it until we get to the end. And then at that point, we're going to do something about it. It's like, no, now you should really be dialing in all of your efforts on a monthly basis and recognizing that, and really even that with how much real-time data is available to organizations now through all the different amazing dashboard tools. There's literally, I was looking at it the other day, there's like 1,000,001 dashboard. I was looking for a new dashboard tool for our business. I was like, there's 1,000,000. How am I supposed to make a choice? There's literally like, I can have a dashboard for every single thing in the whole world. But being able to go, hey, the first step is what can I do on a weekly, monthly basis to ask myself a few questions around how do my customers perceive me in the marketplace? What am I learning from the data that I am collecting, and what decisions can I make based off that data? And then ultimately, and then the bigger question is, are we still in tune with our purpose? Like, are we still connected to what we say we are? And those are things that you can kind of constantly ask yourself. And while those can seemingly seem to be touchy-feely, they're not, and they don't need to be. They're not touchy-feely questions at all. Those are really, truly the foundation of how to ensure your brand stays healthy through the process. Because you touched on shiny object syndrome earlier. I think that's the other big trap for most organizations, is the next best thing always seems like the best thing. It doesn't matter what type of organization you're running. There's always something shiny that if you could just get that, it's all going to work. And if there was one thing that I've learned in my career, that's the biggest lie out there. There's no silver bullet. You could be running the same business as somebody else, and they may see growth at a different. They may see something grow at a different level than you do, at a different pace than you do, and it has nothing to do with you not being good at what you're doing. It has everything to do with, like, that's called the marketplace, and that happens. And so I think that shiny object syndromes can be the big detractor and distractor from us actually making progress. I think that that's really where a ton of the opportunity is. It's just simple rhythms, simple practices where you're engaging at any level, whether you're a $1 billion company or you're just getting started. Those simple rhythms and simple practices that engage you in asking questions about where your brand is and how you're connecting with your customers is really the foundation for all brand and marketing efforts.
Yeah. And would you say some of that's not scalable, right? And it doesn't need to be, like sitting in on customer service for a couple of days, or reading through all the feedback that customers have left on a day, and just really sitting with that, right? Maybe pinging some customers out of the blue that are your regulars, getting on the phone with them, talking to them, and really trying to figure out where the hangups are, or find out, you might find out there's things that you're doing wrong that you didn't realize, or that there's a need in the marketplace that you're not filling, you had no idea it even existed. Is part of it that, where you're trying to stay in tune with the end user, whoever that is?
I think someone has to, and I think that every organization's set up differently. So again, some executives of some organizations may be really, really in tune with that, and they may be the ones that get to be boots on the ground all the time with that. And then there's others where that might be a delegated responsibility. Regardless, the information has to be transferred constantly. There has to be a flow of that information. And if that information is not, if customer experience information and just brand information is not a part of the considerations when making strategic business decisions, you're missing literally one of the most core and elements to decision making, which is what are our customers saying, and also what is the expression of this? What is the brand saying as we move forward? So I think that's definitely something that it's better when it doesn't scale. I think it's better when people are much more connected to that, because I do think we've all had experiences with brands where they feel incredibly, executive teams feel incredibly disconnected. Like, we could talk about household brands where we're like, hey, Uber a few years ago, like, what happened? How did you get so far off your mission? That doesn't make sense to me. Or again, there's plenty of other brands that I remember the day where I was like, well, I'm never using Uber again. Now I've used Lyft exclusively for multiple years. Yep. I think that those things happen, but they happen because the disconnection took place at some point where the customer experience wasn't prioritized and that information wasn't getting translated to everybody that needs to have that in the core of how they make decisions. If you don't put people first from the top down, the brands will never be as valuable and contributing as much as they possibly could back to the people that you're in business with.
Yeah. Let's talk about creativity for a second, and we'll switch gears to the Reaper round. But how can an organization who has got it historically just not injected creativity specifically into the way that they're messaging or telling the story, how can they start to do that? How can they start to work that muscle, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah, and it is a muscle. I think that's a really interesting, and before I dive into how they can do that, I think one note that I failed to mention earlier, but is really important to say, which is I fundamentally believe everybody's creative, regardless of your vocational output, whether you're an accountant or you're working on the line building something, or you're working in marketing, or you're working in sales. Every single person has the ability to use their imagination and bring something new into the world, and as such has an opportunity to be creative. I think the creative industry has been called that because I think that our industry uses that muscle on a daily basis, and really it's the foundation for the service offering that we provide. But it doesn't mean that we're actually mythical unicorn creatures that can show up and spit fairy dust and all of a sudden magic happens. It just means we work out that muscle a lot more. And so it might look that way, but it's not magic at all. We work our asses off to get the work done. And that's a byproduct of using the muscle. And so for organizations that want to get more, there's a couple of things. One is I'd recommend, there's a book that I love called Creative Confidence, I believe. Hopefully that's the name of it. But it's by the Kelly brothers, the founder of IDEO, the product design agency. And I think that book is a phenomenal starter and primer. If you're I don't know where to start with creativity, that's a great book that I would say, if there's one book where you're hey, just read that, it'd probably give you it'll give you a little nos in the tank and probably help you move forward. That's a great place to start. I think second is environment. Put yourself in environmental scenarios where you're challenged to be, to think differently and to be more creative in your solutions. And so that's as simple as workshop. If a workshop at your organization looks one way and we brainstorm one way every single time, how do you switch that up? How do you literally remove the normal way of doing it and go, hey, today we're actually not going to have, as simple as no electronics, only only notepads, and we're going to stick up our ideas on the walls, and we're going to, I have boxes of Legos in my office. We've got all these different things of hey, instead of concepting this brand on a piece of paper or in Illustrator, we have all these Legos. Let's actually have fun for a second, kinesthetically trying something new. And all those things, while they seem well, that just sounds like kid stuff, it's not that at all. What we have to do to really express and change our frame around creativity is move ourselves into places where we're forced to think differently and we're forced to approach problem solving with a unique perspective. Because to me, it's all about perspective. If you can take someone out of the day-to-day that they're totally used to and go, hey, we want you to do something new, you'll be amazed by the results. We do a ton of brand workshops where we've got executive teams that sit in on these, and they're not expecting to do arts and crafts in the room. They're not expecting to do collage exercises or have to present in front of the as a equal in front of the room or whatever it might be. But you'd be pleasantly surprised how many people after those experiences go, man, I really needed this. I haven't done this in so many years. Or man, why don't we do more of this type of stuff? And it's just a matter of we all get tunnel vision. Every person in every organization gets tunnel vision on what we need to get done and what we need to accomplish. And the more we can hone in, the more we can break the cycle. I think that's where the creativity can be expressed in new ways. And you got to have fun doing it. If it's not fun, there's something probably broken in the system, and it's probably bigger organizationally than just whether or not creativity exists. I think it can exist and does exist in most organizations. It's just a matter of is it prioritized? And if it's not prioritized, then there's some simple tweaks that you can make to make sure it is prioritized moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just like having even like a blue sky kind of meeting where it's like, hey, let's forget about how we can actually get this done. But like, what are some of the ideas that you would have that seem off the wall? Some things that you think that would blow the customer's socks off if we could figure out how to get it done. What would those things be? And just start spitballing. And you would be surprised at how many things are actually feasible. Or even just the ideas that came out of that conversation that may be, tangential, but possible.
Yeah. And the last thing I'd say on that is I love that. And I completely agree. I think the other thing that you have to accept is I actually think you have to really be creative in an organization. You have to be just mildly perpetually optimistic. Like there has to be an optimistic element in how you approach your business, which means if you don't think the best is yet to come, then you're living in a scarcity mindset, which means you're already operating from a place of we will never have enough, which means that you're probably going to try to run every business decision through a logic framework it's already skewed, because no one can run their business that way without it eventually being kind of a damned like reality. Because you're like, well, it's going to fail eventually because I'm living believing that there's not enough. I think entrepreneurs run this. Entrepreneurs, small business owners, and just business owners in general. I literally had a conversation right before this over lunch with a guy that runs a very successful coaching practice. But we were joking about how I had made a comment earlier today about cash flow and how, what am I thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about cash flow, or I'm thinking about this. And he was like, man, it's humbling when you hear someone else just acknowledge that's something that they're thinking about. Because I'm also thinking about that, but I thought I was the only one thinking about that. You're like, no, I talked to a guy that's running $100 million company yesterday, and he was saying, I'm thinking about cash flow. So it's just funny that we get in our heads and we start to think we're the only people in the world that must be thinking about certain things. And I think that perpetuates scarcity versus us really believing that the best is yet to come for organizations. And the best being yet to come doesn't guarantee that your organization is going to live on forever and you're going to be a billionaire or anything like that. But as entrepreneurs, we cannot plan for plan B, because if we plan for plan B, you're never going to be creative enough with plan A, and you're never going to really get there to steal and adapt. Probably a Tony Robbinsism there, but I do think that that's a truth that is self-evident in creativity. It's like if you're showing up trying to bring creative solutions to the table, but you're already doubting your ability to do that, you're never going to push yourself to get to a place where you're really dreaming big dreams. And we, as organizations, I think that the world would look a lot different if we stopped limiting our capacity to dream and started really leveraging that creative imagination to see what's possible. If we just started to trust one another and really go for it versus kind of play safe.
Yeah. I think we need hope, man. I mean, to me, my best days are my most hopeful days, period.
I agree.
End of story. So it's that not necessarily that an idea that I've implemented is working, but there's a hope that it's going to work, right? There's an idea that there's an inkling that it's going to work. There's some early evidence that it's going to work. And those are the days where I'm most excited because I feel like, okay, this is hopeful. We're going in the right direction. I think this is going to happen, And I think that those are the days I have my best ideas. And the days that I have the worst ideas, the days that I am most stressed out and anxious are the days where I have no hope, right? Where I feel like, oh, dude, everything's crashing and burning, Totally. And the thing is like acknowledging, just like your friend said, acknowledging that those days do happen, but not, you don't want them to be the norm. You don't want them to be like your standard mode of operation, right? And instead, try to look through the lens of abundance and trying to maybe step outside of the box. I like the idea of changing your environment. This is why I work from coffee shops a lot of the times. This is why I love to read inspiring business books when I'm on vacation or I'm in a different setting, because my mind is just open, and this is when I have the best ideas, right? I love that, man. All right, so you ready to switch over to the Reaper round?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay.
I mean, I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
All right, this is where our guest answers some rapid-fire questions while they attempt to eat an entire bag or part of a bag of Carolina Reaper jerky. Nate said he's ready. He says that he likes some hot stuff, so we'll see. We're gonna test that out.
No, this is I haven't tried this before, so this is definitely going in.
You're blind.
Any context for this. This is all blind. It looks spicy.
That's a big piece.
This is a big piece of jerky right here, folks. That's only one. There's one more this size in here. Do you get me a double pack? What's going on here?
We got you the special packs, huge piece. All right, man. And Nate's he's taking a bite. All right, favorite book. This could be something you read in the last year or a classic for you. What stands out? And it doesn't have to be business related.
Atomic Habits. Just finished it.
Dude, I love that book.
Yeah,
I love that book. What stood out for you?
I think the actual biggest piece of what stood out to me was about identity. Burning.
We're gonna let you chew through that.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk while I chew, just so you know. The thing that stood out to me about identity was this idea that when we form healthy habits, they have to be identity-based, not programmatic and systems-based. Because I think oftentimes I, in my own life, have experienced what it's like to just try to grind out a new habit versus being like, for instance, working out. I've played the weight roller coaster for years, and in January I started a workout routine with the belief that I'm a healthy guy. I'm already a healthy guy, and I'm building healthy rhythms to continue to remain a healthy person with just this big identity shift. I've lost 25 pounds and gained a ton of muscle, and now I love working out. That's never I've never had that in my whole life. It's because I changed my entire frame on it.
Versus saying that I'm unhealthy, but I'm trying to be healthy. Is that the difference? Yeah, it's a great book, man. Any quotes you live your life by?
Oh man, quotes I live my life by. That's a great question. My mouth is on fire, by the way. Just throwing that out there. I'm like thinking. I feel like, am I praying right now? What am I doing? I'm not sure. Blacking out a little bit. I think, I do think like treat others as you want to be treated. Like I do think, and then another one is like seek first to understand before being understood. I think the world would look a lot different if we all modeled that behavior. I think those are probably two that I try to live by.
I dig it. Your biggest business blunder, and how did it set you up for success later?
Not being willing to make hard decisions when they needed to be made. Probably cost me, $500,000, if not more. They set me up for success because once you've learned that lesson once, I'm drooling now from this, by the way, so this is great. Once you've learned that lesson once, it's fortunate because you don't have to repeat it. And I think you learn a lot about yourself and learn a lot about identity through the process.
Yeah.
My tongue's numb.
Yeah. That might make it worse. I'm curious to see how the LaCroix helps you, or maybe it doesn't help you.
What if I just had a big gallon of milk over here?
That would be funny. I think that's there's a lot of wisdom there. There have been a lot of mistakes that I've made. Some of them just like that, where I knew I went far beyond the point where I realized I needed to make a decision. I didn't do it because it was too painful.
Right.
But the value is that you can lean on that previous pain later. And so when you're in a situation that feels like the last one,
right,
you'll identify it immediately. You'll say, "Oh, this feels like that last bad decision I make. I'm not going to make it again. It feels just like it." You'll be able to identify those situations and get through them quickly, or even avoid them entirely.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's just being able to make decisions more efficiently. I think when you're an entrepreneur, it's easy to be afraid of decision making because there's a finality to it, right? Like there's definition. When you make decisions, things change. And that can be scary, but I think the more we're willing to do it, the better.
Okay, I dig it. Best under $100 purchase.
Ooh, that's a good question. This vest. This was from Target. I've worn it almost every day for 6 months, so that would be my answer. I have a 1-year-old, and so I went for the capsule wardrobe by accident last year. And so I've worn this vest almost every day since September. Still smells pretty good, but thanks Target for this $20 vest that's really become my image in all ways. So.
Last time I saw you, you were wearing it several months ago. Yeah. No, I vouch for the capsule wardrobe, man. It eliminates that decision-making process entirely. Men, women included could both have that. I mean, I like black V-neck shirts because they look good with everything, and I've got eight pair of them. Is that a pair? No, 8 of them. From
you could have pairs, then you'd have 16 of them.
And I'd have 16 of them, right? So I've got 8 of them from Pact. They're organic. They're like $9. You know, awesome. And they fit nice. They feel nice. And so I'm with you on the capsule. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most impacted your life, most improved your life? Or to put it another way, what have you changed your mind about?
Carolina Reaper jerky for one. I'm sweating. I'm like legitimately sweating over here. I'm also wearing a vest, but I'm not going to take it off now because I'm committed. Wow, that last piece was. I think I got all the pepper. Whoa.
Did you eat the whole thing?
I have this little.
Oh, you ate a lot, man. Well done.
That's the whole package, but I feel like I'm dying. But I feel proud of myself at the same time.
Well done. You should feel proud.
I would say there's 2 things, and I know you asked for one, but I'm going to say 2.
That's okay.
One would be mindfulness. And I know that's super hot right now, but self-care was never a big priority for me in running and growing businesses. And that started to catch up towards my 30s. And I think at 30 was when I was like, this is not sustainable. Like this, my path and what I'm doing isn't going to work if I lose myself in the process. And I think that's been a remarkable journey through therapy, through meditation, through devotions, through church, through a lot of different things. And it's been really positive. And the other would be coaching. So I learned a lot about myself, that I am the best version of myself when I have trusted people speaking into my life that are speaking from a place of authority, but also as a coach, trying to make me a better person. So 2019, I had an executive coach. I have a fitness coach, and I have just like kind of another guy that is more like a therapist. But like all of those people speaking in my life make me a better leader, because I can show up and be my authentic self in my environment of leadership, but then also in my family and with them. And in those environments, I can be honest about how I'm experiencing life and what's positive and negative about those experiences.
Yeah. Mindfulness specifically, like meditation, or what are you saying?
Yeah. So meditation is a big part of my kind of day to day. I do spend time meditating, but I kind of do both. So I do kind of more of a traditional meditation. I try to do it in the morning with a 1-year-old. I'll admit fully, I'm not perfect at it because she doesn't sleep. I'm not up as early.
She doesn't like to meditate.
She doesn't like to meditate. I don't like to meditate. No. So, and then the other one is just like I have tried to incorporate journaling and kind of devote like more spiritual devotionals in the evenings. And so I try to bookend my days with things that are not work, so that I'm not constantly braiding my brain like just with input, but trying to like actually rest.
Yeah.
And so those have been a big thing. And then the other thing is the idea of Sabbath, or this idea of just like taking a full day of rest on a weekend has been really remarkable for me, just actually learning to do that. And then as I've done that, seeing the amazing benefits, both personally, just as an individual, but then from a family perspective of being like, we're all in, we're here together, no phones, we're like spending time together. It's been really, really awesome and much needed in my life. Because I think I used to think of Saturdays and Sundays as extra days that I could get more work done. And now I think of them as rest days where I refill and try to create more of my kind of just more space to lead again the next week.
Yeah. I think the thing about the mindfulness and the taking the time, and I like how you said bookending it, is that you remind yourself you're human.
Mm-hmm.
You remind yourself that work and your profession is just a
Right.
component of your life, and it's not your life.
Right.
And that like journaling and devotional and maybe even a gratitude journal or something, it pulls your face away from the bark. It allows you to like really see things for what they are, and it reminds you that you're human. The Sabbath, like taking a day, turning your phone off, putting an airplane or whatever. It's so immensely powerful, especially now, because we're just like so damn connected. And this is why I finally got off and got an Apple Watch. I mean, I've hated on them forever, but I'm like, wait a minute, I can leave my phone behind. But still, if my wife needs to get in contact with me, she can. But I can just disconnect from my phone. I don't need to have it, right? And then I'm not tempted to go search for something, right? And do some research or try to do some work or whatever it is. So it's huge. And then the other thing on the coaching component, I wanted to chime in just really quick, and we'll wrap up, is even if you can't afford a coach, you need to have people that, like you said, speaking life into you, but also checking you, right? Or holding you accountable. And so they can say, hey, Peter, this is a stupid idea. Or, hey, man, you told me what your business is about or what your personal life, like your priorities are, and this does not fall in line with that, and check you against that. So everybody needs that sort of accountability partner or even accountability group with a few other people that know you for who you are. They know what your moral code is. They know what your priorities are, and they can stop you and question you. And I just think that for me has been incredibly powerful to have that sort of that reinforcement.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And I have both. And I think that's been a great benefit, is having people you trust and have shared purpose and are willing to speak into your life and challenge you when really sometimes we're too close to it. Sometimes we need people that we trust to say, hey, you may be looking at this a little bit wrong, or you may be, or you may not be looking at it wrong. But maybe for me, a lot of it's like, I have a lot of guys challenging me on, like, I naturally am a diplomatic type of person, so I can lean into conflict avoidance versus making decisions. And you know that about me because we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
And you know some of my stories, but that's something where when you then have a team of people that can speak into that, the good news is you don't have to get stuck there. And then you can acknowledge that and move on. And I think that is such a benefit. And yeah, it doesn't have to be official. It can be relationships that you trust, really just speaking life into what you're doing. I also this is just a side note, it looks like some angelic being has just landed outside my phone booth room here. But it's just,
the sun is just shining in.
The sun is shining in right now.
As if you needed more heat in that room.
I just ate that is I'll reap the consequences of that one. But that was actually really tasty.
I'm glad to hear it. You did well.
My face hurts. My face actually hurts. It's hard to continue to smile and not like want to just like drink a gallon of milk, which would also probably not be a good idea.
Probably not going to be a good idea. Final two questions here. What should I have asked you, but I didn't?
I would say the only reason I have the only reason any of the success that I've had over the years has happened is because I have an amazing spouse who supported me for the last decade as I've worked really, really hard and failed really, really hard at times too. And I think that without my wife, Christine, it wouldn't be possible. And I think that that's just something that I think is a testament to many entrepreneurs out there is anyone that started a business has a significant other that has played an enormous role in that, in the viability of that. And so I appreciate her and my business partner's Greg's wife as well, because they're the backbone that's helped us accomplish what we've accomplished with our business. And then secondly, I think as a dad, I think you learn a whole new level of responsibility and a whole new balance, going back to mindfulness and just balance of rhythms and all those things. That a conversation I had today was about how I want to make sure that my daughter remembers even the years where she's only one, but I want her to remember the years where her dad was working hard as not an absentee dad, but as a dad that's incredibly present when he's home, and is incredibly focused when he's working. But it's a combination of both of those things, because I think that many kids can experience growing up without a parent really present because they're just grinding constantly and can't balance the two. But I think it's not worth it. To me, none of this is worth it if we lose our families in the process. So yeah. I think that for me is, we didn't talk about it, but family is probably the core DNA of why I do what I do. And I'm grateful for all the opportunities I've been given throughout my life and for my parents and all of that stuff.
I love that, man. I love it. I'm glad you brought it up. Final question, as we always wrap up, your favorite Mission Meats flavor?
I'm a classic beef guy. I like the classic, but I will say I had not tried the Carolina Reaper before. And while I probably wouldn't recommend eating it on a daily basis, just because that might hurt, the flavor is fantastic. And I'm not just saying that because I ate a whole bag of it while being filmed and trying to answer questions. I'm saying it because the flavor is fantastic. Like I like it, and I like hot food. So I'm going to go with classic, but then I'm going to go with backup. Let's get that Carolina Reaper flavor on everything. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the elote chips from Trader Joe's. Those are also one of my favorite foods. So
totally awesome, man. Well, Nate, if somebody wants to keep tabs on what you're working on, what's the best way?
Sure. I think the best way would probably be to follow along. If you want to see kid pictures, follow me on Instagram. You'll see all the photos of my family at Nate Spees on Instagram and most social channels. But madebygrizzly.com is our agency here in San Diego. Feel free to follow along as we continue to grow and as we continue to do work all around the country. So it's been a fun ride, and I'm always open and happy to have conversations with people that have questions about brand or creativity or how they can infuse more of it in their lives.
Dope. I love that, man. Nate, it's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, bro. Later. Thanks so much for tuning in. It means so much to me and the entire Mission Meats team. Now, I know every show you watch asks you to do something, right? Asks you to subscribe, leave a review, share the show, all this stuff, right? But it's because it's the best way for us to grow our show. So what do you say? If you know someone that would really appreciate listening to this episode, hearing the actionable advice, share it with them, will you? Shoot them the link, iTunes, YouTube, however you're watching this thing. Tag them in the comments. Share the show with someone, okay? It'll help them. It'll help us. It'll be great, okay? We're putting this content out so that viewers and listeners like you have gotten some benefit out of it, right? And so if there's something else that you want to hear about, either from a person or a topic, shoot me an email, peter@missionmeats.co. That's peter@missionmeats.co. And I'll read those emails and see if I can get that person on the show or an expert in that topic that you want to hear about so desperately, right? Last thing, you watch this guest try or not try to eat the Reaper. If you want to try to eat the Reaper, right? We've got a challenge going on social media right now, specifically on Instagram, but you can do it on Facebook too. Record yourself eating that bag, tag it with Mission Reaper, tag us also, right? And for a chance to win $100 of free, delicious Mission Meats product for the most hilarious or creative video. So if you want to do that, grab a bag. All right? Now get out there and live your mission. Thanks so much.